Every ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains knows the rule, even if nobody explains it on your first day. Before answering a transmission addressed to you, put one bare hand on something fixed by human hands. A trail post, a bridge rail, the concrete footing of a fire tower. State your unit number and exact location. Then wait until another ranger repeats both back correctly. Only then do you answer. I followed that rule for 9 years. The one time I didn't was at 2:13 on a clear Thursday afternoon. I was alone inside the Balsam Ridge Communications Annex, logging storm damage while rainwater tapped from my jacket onto the rubber floor. The call came through the maintenance channel, the one Ruth used from the generator shed. The indicator light even showed her unit. That was why I reached for the handset before grounding. Balsam Ridge, go ahead. For 3 seconds, there was only static. Then several voices answered together. Men, women, at least one child. Every word arrived at precisely the same time. 31 hikers trapped in Morrow Gap. Water rising. Confirm our location. I checked the laminated dispatch grid beside the console. There was no Morrow Gap. Repeat your location. That was my second mistake. At 4:47, a road unit reported a green sign none of us had installed. By sunset, it stood beside Newfound Gap Road. Morrow Gap, 6 miles. I had driven that road at 7:10 that morning. The shoulder had been empty. No work order existed, and the sign's posts were already rusted deep brown at the bolts. At the time, I thought the callers needed us to confirm where they were. Weeks later, I understood the more troubling possibility. They had called to learn whether anyone at Balsam Ridge would answer at all. 3 weeks before the Morrow Gap sign appeared, Balsam Ridge was supposed to be a temporary communications assignment. A storm line had crossed the western park 2 nights earlier, dropping trees over service roads and knocking repeaters onto backup power. I was sent to supervise battery replacements, log damaged equipment, and cover the search and rescue desk until the dispatcher returned from medical leave. Nothing about the assignment looked unusual on paper. The morning disappeared into mileage sheets, weather reports, campsite closures, and radio checks from crews clearing limbs near Laurel Falls. The annex was a concrete building with narrow windows, a generator shed behind it, and enough dust in the vents to make every breath smell metallic. That kind of place suited me. I had spent 9 years learning that mountains were safest when reduced to coordinates, trail numbers, and times written in permanent ink. Memory could shift. Maps could be corrected. A stamped post stayed where someone had driven it. Ruth Calder was at the console when I arrived. She had worked communications longer than anyone in the district and spoke in the clipped, patient tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed by people who could not see her. Radio check every 2 hours, she said. Copy. And use posted locations, not GPS labels. I looked at the digital map glowing beside her. Storm damage? She kept sorting incident cards. Language damage. I assumed it was dispatcher humor. Then a backcountry unit called from beyond the western grid. Ruth muted the speaker before the ranger could finish naming his location. She wrote the time on a form, drew a line through the transcript, and waited with one hand resting on the concrete wall. Outside, sunlight moved across wet spruce and bright moss. Inside, the generator hummed beneath the silence. I asked what she was waiting for. Ruth watched the muted radio, for him to tell us somewhere that still exists. The ranger transmitted again, 30 seconds later. Balsam Ridge, Unit 14. I'm at Laurel Fork Junction. Ruth unmuted the speaker, but did not answer. On the digital map, 14's locator blinked 2 miles west of the junction, beside an old service road. His mileage log placed him 11 miles from the gate. The route distance sheet put 11 miles near Bota Mountain, across a drainage he could not have crossed. 3 locations, 1 ranger. Ruth keyed the microphone. 14, identify the nearest fixed marker. A pause followed. Wind moved across his handset, then boots scraped gravel. I've got a trail post. Touch it with your bare hand. Read the stamped number. He sounded irritated. Dispatch, my GPS is functioning. Read the post. Another pause. LFJ, marker 27. Ruth pressed her palm against the concrete wall. Unit 14, at Laurel Fork Junction, marker 27. Confirm. Confirmed. The locator icon shifted east and settled over the junction. I checked the paper grid. I could have sworn the service road had been marked there seconds earlier, but the printing was old, the laminate scratched, and I had not circled it. Bad data? I asked. Write down what you saw before you decide what it was. The generator thumped unevenly beneath the concrete floor. The transcript printer started behind us. A strip of paper slid into the tray with 14's call sign, the time, and Ruth's confirmed location. Below it was a line neither had spoken. Unit 14 departing Morrow Gap. The live transcript did not show it. I blamed a corrupted cache until Ruth tore the page free, folded it once, and hid it beneath the incident cards. Where is Morrow Gap? She reached for a laminated directive under the console. First, Ruth said, you need to learn why we never answer from memory. Ruth placed the directive between us and flattened its curled corners. The heading read, Geographic Integrity During Radio Operations. It looked like every document I had ignored. Federal seal, revision date, numbered paragraphs, language written to survive lawsuits. The first instruction was boxed in red. Before answering a transmission addressed to your unit, establish bare-skin contact with a fixed, documented marker. State your unit number and posted location. Do not acknowledge location traffic until another ranger repeats both correctly. I read it twice. So that was what 14 just did? That was what kept his position from becoming a debate. I glanced toward the printer. His locator corrected after you confirmed him. That could be a routing fault. Ruth pulled the incident cards over the transcript. It could. The answer irritated me more than an argument would have. I asked why bare skin mattered. She said gloves made contact unreliable. I asked why a bridge rail counted, but a boulder did not. Bridge rails have installation and records, she said. Posts have survey numbers. Natural landmarks depend on whoever remembers them. That sounded like superstition, written by someone who understood procurement forms. I told her as much. Ruth did not take offense. She turned the directive around and tapped the sentence beneath the boxed rule. Unconfirmed units are not authorized to acknowledge locational traffic. Radios don't authorize geography, I said. No, Ruth replied. Rangers do. Outside, a maintenance truck passed the window, tires whispering over wet gravel. Everything beyond the glass looked measurable again. Distance, weight, direction. Ruth rested her hand against the concrete wall. Never let the system decide where you meant. I wanted to ask what that meant. Instead, I noticed 3 dates beside the rule. The newest was less than a month old. Beside it were 2 initials. One belonged to Ruth. The other appeared nowhere on the roster I had signed that morning. Ruth covered both with her palm and slid the page lower. Read the next directive. Ruth kept her palm over the initials while I read the next 5 directives. The second prohibited repeating, correcting, or acknowledging any place name missing from the dispatch grid. The caller had to be redirected toward a listed landmark without the ranger saying the unknown name aloud. The third covered conflicting distances. If 2 units reported different mileage to the same junction, both stopped moving. Dispatch recorded the time on paper and chose neither measurement. The fourth concerned echoed transmissions. If the radio repeated the last 5 seconds after the microphone was released, its battery had to be removed. No clarification, no correction. The fifth was shorter. 3 or more voices speaking in perfect unison shall be classified as terrain interference. No names, casualty totals, coordinates, or location confirmation were to be transmitted. I read it twice. Terrain interference was not language dispatch used for people. The final directive described trail signs bearing black street numbers instead of park notation. Rangers were to cover them with orange survey cloth, never photograph, map, remove, or pass them, then return by the exact approach route. Nothing mentioned danger. It read like damaged equipment guidance, except dates crowded nearly every paragraph. Some dates were followed by check marks. Others had a black line through them. What did those mean? Field results. And the lines? Ruth slid the directive away before I could touch it. The newest entry sat beside the unison voice rule, 26 days earlier. Ruth's initials appeared there again, beside the same second set she had covered. Who was with you? She placed the sheet beneath the console and locked the drawer. Outside, a crew radioed that the western trail markers had been repaired. Ruth answered in her ordinary voice, calm and exact. Then she looked at me. "You'll learn the rules in daylight," she said. "That is when they sound least necessary." The following morning, she sent me to inspect marker L19. The next morning, I rode out with 2 trail workers to inspect marker L19, an aluminum post near Laurel Fork. Its number matched the work order, the map, and the stamped plate bolted beneath the trail name. In daylight, Ruth's directives felt almost embarrassing. The forest was bright from the storm, every leaf rinsed clean. Water clicked through drainage bars. Crushed fern and chain oil followed us uphill. We tightened bear cables, cleared branches from a footbridge, replaced a faded campsite arrow, and answered 3 visitors, asking how far they had left to climb. Nothing moved when we named it. Nothing argued with the map. Near the upper switchbacks, one worker stopped. "Was that spur here yesterday?" A narrow trail opened between 2 tulip poplars. It looked maintained, but not recently built. Moss covered the cut banks. Fallen leaves lay pressed into the tread, as if boots had used it for years. At its entrance stood a black sign on a square wooden post. 19. Not L19. No trail name. No park emblem. just a street-style number painted white. I checked the maintenance map. The switchbacks touched with no spur between them. The worker raised his phone. "Don't photograph it." The words came out before I had decided whether I believed them. He lowered the phone. "Why?" I pulled orange survey cloth from my pack and tied it across the sign, following the directive. Up close, the post smelled of creosote. Rust had bled deep into the grain around both bolts, and the initials carved into its back had weathered gray in the clear morning. Beyond the cloth, the spur descended toward a valley hidden by green leaves. A radio cracked at my shoulder. Unit 14 reported Laurel Fork Junction, 6/10 of a mile farther north than where I was standing. I looked from L19 behind us to number 19 ahead. Then Ruth came over dispatch. Both units stopped moving. I stopped with my left boot angled toward the numbered spur. Behind me, both trail workers froze. One held the orange cloth's loose end between two fingers, though I did not remember handing it to him. Unit 14 came back over the radio. "Dispatch, I'm standing at Laurel Fork Junction. My marker reads 27. I looked at L19 behind us. The junction marker sat where it had always been, less than 40 yards downhill. Ruth answered without choosing either report. 14. Hold position. Barrett, hold position. No one corrects distance. The younger worker whispered, "But we can see the junction." "So can he," I said. Ruth told us to write the time on paper, not on a phone, not into the radio log. I wrote 10:26 across the margin of the work order. Then the birds stopped. No fading calls, no startled flight. 1 second, the canopy held warblers, creek noise, and insects. The next, only our breathing remained. The switchback below us seemed to lengthen. I did not see trees move. That would have been easier. Instead, trunks I had used as reference points no longer lined up. The footbridge appeared farther downslope. L19 stood beyond a bend that had not existed moments earlier. The worker beside me tightened his grip on my sleeve. Wasn't the sign right there? Orange cloth fluttered between the poplars, but the black number 19 was gone. Behind the cloth was unbroken brush. Ruth kept both units silent for 11 minutes. When a thrush called uphill, the forest settled at once. The bend vanished. L19 returned to 40 yards. 14's reported position matched the junction again. Neither worker remembered seeing a street sign. One remembered tying orange cloth around a sapling. The other insisted I had tied it there myself. I looked down at the work order. Beneath 10:26, another line had appeared in darker ink. Distance conflict resolved. Below it, one location withdrawn. That afternoon, the radio gave us 31 reasons to ask what withdrawn meant. I sealed the work order inside a plastic sleeve and stopped calling Ruth's directives equipment procedures. The trail workers remembered orange cloth, but not the sign. I remembered both. That difference stayed with me more than the moving junction. At 2:13, the auxiliary speaker clicked. No call sign followed. Then voices came through together. Men, women, one child. 31 people speaking in unison, without one breath landing ahead of another. Balsam Ridge, respond. Water rising in Morrow Gap. Confirm our location. Ruth's hand went flat against the concrete wall. Mine did not. Not yet. She pointed to Rule 5 beneath the console. 3 or more voices, speaking in perfect unison, shall be classified as terrain interference. The transmission repeated. 31 hikers, 2 injured, water rising. Ruth muted the microphone before I could touch it. That sounds human, I said. So did the last one. The incident 26 days ago? She did not answer. The voices returned and began listing names. I recognized 3 from missing person bulletins. A father and daughter overdue from a backcountry campsite, a college student last seen near Alum Cave, and a retired teacher whose abandoned pack had been found beside a creek. Rule 5 prohibited names, casualty totals, coordinates, and location confirmation. It did not explain what to do when terrain knew our cases. Then the child's voice separated from the others for half a second. Permit 7419. On the next word, all 31 voices were together again. Ruth's fingers stopped over the incident cards. I opened the permit ledger. Number 7419 belonged to a family that had entered the park that morning. Their route passed nowhere near Laurel Fork. The permit had been issued at our front desk. No copy had gone over the radio. If that isn't a person, I said, how does it know today's number? The speaker clicked. This time, the 31 voices asked for me by name. Noah Barrett, Unit 12. All 31 voices said it together. My hand moved toward the concrete wall before Ruth caught my wrist. Don't ground for them. They already know who I am. They know what the radio knows. The child separated again. My mother is Elaine Mercer. She's at the Sugarlands desk. I knew the name. Elaine had filed a missing party report an hour earlier. Ruth switched to the secure command channel and read the permit number, the verified names, and the casualty report. She never said Morrow Gap. Neither did I. District Command answered after a pause. Do not acknowledge the unlisted location. Redirect callers toward a posted landmark. They say the water is rising, I said. Then ask for a listed landmark. The secure channel closed. A second later, the muted auxiliary speaker clicked. There are no park markers here. A printer beside the GIS terminal started feeding paper. The map showed a narrow valley forming beneath Laurel Fork, directly over 2 backcountry campsites, a maintenance road, and 3 occupied staff cabins. Morrow Gap was not appearing in empty wilderness. It was taking someone else's place. If we confirm them, Ruth said, the land inside that boundary may be the location withdrawn instead. And if we don't? She looked at the plastic sleeve holding my altered work order. We let the system withdraw them. That was the choice Command had reduced to procedure. Refuse 31 people whose names we could verify, or recognize a valley that might erase not only 6 occupants, but the roads, records, and histories connecting them to everyone outside it. The speaker clicked again. The voices recited the names of the 6 people inside the threatened campsites and cabins. Every name was correct. I reached for the handset. Ruth blocked it with her forearm. I followed that instinct once, she said. The controlled dispatcher voice was gone. We brought everyone back. I waited. Ruth looked toward the blank section spreading across the map. But the place we left from was gone when we returned. It happened in 1998, Ruth said. The auxiliary speaker stayed muted, its carrier light blinking while 31 voices waited behind it. Ruth kept one palm against the wall. She had been a seasonal dispatcher then, working from a trailer near Deep Creek. A storm trapped 4 hikers beyond a washed-out footbridge. Their trail number was valid, but their coordinates continued past the mapped end of the route. One team heard them on the radio, Ruth said. Another heard them shouting downhill. The voices gave names, injuries, and a permit number. All of it matched. Ruth authorized the closest team to answer. They grounded at the bridge rail, confirmed their unit, and repeated the reported trail number. 10 minutes later, a continuation appeared beyond the bridge, where the map showed only steep drainage. The rescue worked. All 4 hikers came back alive. The carrier light flashed twice. The water rising warning scrolled across the inactive transcript. "So what disappeared?" I asked. 2 miles of the response route. Not blocked. Not damaged. Gone. By morning, maps ended at the bridge. Maintenance records said the missing section had never existed. Families remembered using another trailhead. Even the rescued hikers insisted they had approached from somewhere else. Only Ruth and one ranger remembered the original route. She wrote his initials on the first directive. I looked toward the locked drawer. The initials from last month? No? Her answer came too quickly. The recent incident was still something she would not name. Ruth said they never learned why the rescue changed anything. They only learned what followed. Maps kept one version, memories adjusted to match, and the competing route disappeared. A rescue can succeed, she said, and still erase the road that made it possible. The auxiliary speaker clicked, although its mute light remained on. 31 voices whispered my unit number. Ruth slid a brass key across the console. "If you think silence is the cruelest choice," she said, "read the logs before you answer them." I took the brass key while the carrier light continued blinking. The archive cabinet stood in a storage room behind the dispatch desk, wedged between handset batteries and boxes of expired incident forms. The lock resisted twice before opening with a metallic snap. Inside, the air smelled of paper, dust, and old carbon ink. Ruth remained at the console. Through the wall, the auxiliary speaker clicked at uneven intervals, although its mute light was still on. The files were arranged by year, rather than incident type. Most were ordinary: lightning strikes, washed bridges, overdue campers, missing equipment. Then I found a folder marked 1974, Geographic Discrepancies. The first log described calls from a settlement named Hensley Cut. No such settlement appeared on the attached map. A ranger repeated the name over dispatch. By morning, the access road behind his unit no longer connected to the park. Another entry mentioned a school bus heard over a forestry channel. Another described a cemetery appearing beside a trail crew's lunch site. Every report ended with one location crossed out in black pencil. I turned the page. The coordinates at the top matched Balsam Ridge Communications Annex. The site name did not. Coldwater Relay Cabin. The diagram showed our concrete footprint, generator shed, west-facing service road, and radio mast. It also showed a basement staircase beneath the dispatch room. The annex had no basement. I checked the floor plan again. A handwritten note filled the bottom margin. Cold water withdrawn after dual confirmation. Balsam Ridge retained. Balsam was misspelled. The coordinates were not. Until then, I had assumed the directives protected real places from false ones. The log offered a worse possibility. Balsam Ridge might only be the version that had won. The speaker clicked behind the wall. 31 voices said, "Coldwater Relay, respond." At the back of the folder, I found a second ledger bound with red thread. Its label read, "Locations refused entry." I untied the red thread. The first pages contained no mention of Morrow Gap. They listed places in different hands, each with a date, radio frequency, and reason for denial. A fire tower reported after demolition. A mining road missing from county records. A church settlement abandoned before the park existed. Coordinates spoken incorrectly during rescues. Trail names dispatchers refused to repeat. Campsites heard over radios years after their permits had expired. Some entries included names. I recognized several from missing person bulletins. The father and daughter had been logged beside an unconfirmed footbridge in 2009. The retired teacher appeared beneath a fire road denied in 1987, 14 years before she disappeared. Their names had not arrived with the places. They had been added later. Through the wall, the carrier light flashed. 31 voices repeated, "Water rising." I turned another page. Locations that first appeared separately began sharing details. Hensley Cut acquired the cemetery from the trail crew report. The demolished tower appeared on the mining road. A school bus route ended beside Coldwater Relay. Beside each merger, someone had written, "Refusal does not remove occupancy." The paper beneath my thumb felt damp. A line of black pencil faded while I watched. Not vanished, faded, as though the ledger was being revised more slowly than the digital systems outside. Analog records were not protected. They were only late. Near the ledger's end, the rejected places stopped having individual names. A dispatcher in 2003 grouped them under Morrow Holding Area. 5 years later, another hand changed area to Gap. The spelling beside the earliest entry was Morrow. Like Balsam, the name had stabilized only after enough official records repeated it correctly. Morrow Gap was not a false valley trying to enter the park. It was where refused roads, communities, trails, and the people attached to them had accumulated whenever our maps chose something else. The GIS printer started beyond the wall. Ruth called my name. When I returned to dispatch, a valley occupied the map beneath Laurel Fork. A road had appeared beside it, and the annex floor plan now included stairs leading down. The stairs appeared where the Coldwater diagram said they should be. A metal door interrupted the wall beneath the dispatch clock. I had crossed that room many times. A filing cabinet stood there an hour earlier. Ruth stood beside it with one hand on the concrete. Beneath her palm, an inspection plate read, "Coldwater Relay, 1974. "Was that always there?" I asked. She looked at me too long. "Of course." The answer frightened me more than the door. On the GIS screen, Morrow Gap occupied the drainage beneath Laurel Fork. The road beside it had 37 years of resurfacing records. Printed park maps showed forest. One vehicle tablet showed the road. Another displayed only contour lines. The disagreement spread through the radio network. Unit 14 remembered patrolling Morrow Gap since his first season. Another ranger accused him of inventing it. A trail crew sent a photograph of a stone bridge they claimed had stood there for decades. Its metadata said that morning. The muted speaker clicked. "Water at the lower stairs," 31 voices said. Ruth opened the door. Concrete steps descended beneath the annex, matching the 1974 drawing. Metal lockers lined the basement wall. Green uniforms hung inside beneath Coldwater District patches, their fabric brittle with age. One locker stood open and empty. Its nameplate read E. Vance, the same initials beside Ruth's 26-day incident. Before I could ask, tires crunched across the gravel outside. A family entered carrying grocery bags and a house key I had never seen. The father asked which road closure was preventing them from reaching home. "Where do you live?" He gave an address on the new road inside Morrow Gap. His daughter stared past me toward the basement. "Why did you change the station's name?" Ruth turned toward her. The lettering on Ruth's shoulder looked unfamiliar, but my eyes refused to hold it. Behind them, the roadside sign no longer read Balsam Ridge. It read Coldwater Relay, and Ruth was wearing a cold water patch. I stared at Ruth's shoulder until the patch stopped looking strange. Coldwater District. "What?" she asked. "You work at Balsam Ridge." Her expression tightened with the patience people use around someone who has forgotten an obvious fact. "I have dispatched from Coldwater for 18 years. The family's address verified on every system. Property deed, school enrollment, utility account, vehicle registration. A photograph showed their house beneath a ridge I had hiked for 9 years without seeing a roofline. Then vehicles arrived. Residents came carrying mail, groceries, toolboxes, and complaints about blocked roads. None behaved frightened or confused. They knew one another. They knew Ruth. One man thanked her for coordinating a chimney fire response the previous winter. The report existed. So did 12 years of inspection records bearing her signature. Each time the printer fed out another page, the spelling improved. Balsam became Balsam. Coldwater gained a district code. Morrow Gap acquired a school bus route, a volunteer fire station, and photographs from July picnics. The new history was not replacing blank space. It was pushing against ours. A ranger called from campsite 27, asking why his map had gone white. 6 visitors were still there, but the reservation system showed no campsite, access trail, or permits under their names. Behind him, children argued over a card game. On our wall map, the campground faded beneath the new road. Ruth told the ranger to remain grounded and avoid naming his location. He answered carefully, trying not to frighten the families nearby. "How long do we stay here?" Ruth had no answer. The Coldwater residents were real. They had memories, records, homes, and people who loved them. So did the campers, disappearing from every system while they still spoke to us. I looked at the growing valley, then at the fixed markers listed across the park. One confirmed location could defeat another, but every available ranger confirming a fixed marker at once might prevent the map from choosing. I reached for the park-wide command channel. "We ground the whole park," I said. Ruth looked at the Coldwater patch on her shoulder, then at the directives beneath the console. She no longer remembered Balsam Ridge, but she still knew every rule. The chain breaks if one marker has already changed, she said. So we use pairs, I replied. Each ranger touches a posted marker, confirms the next unit, and writes the time by hand. No GPS labels. No memory. The carrier light flashed. Water above the first landing, 31 voices said. District Command resisted for less than a minute. Then Campsite 27 vanished from the reservation system, and the ranger there reported that one child could no longer remember the trailhead. 2 units lacked partners. 3 found markers bearing Coldwater numbers. Every available unit was assigned a fixed marker. Bridge rails, survey posts, fire tower footings, maintenance gates. Dispatch linked them in sequence across both sides of the park. The first ranger grounded at Sugarlands. Unit 3, Sugarlands radio mast. The next repeated it, then stated her own position. One by one, voices crossed the network. For several minutes, the map stopped changing. Coldwater residents remained inside the annex. The campground stayed white on the screen, but its radio signal held. Morrow Gap's road stopped advancing beneath the contour lines. Then the chain reached me. I placed my hand against the concrete wall. The inspection plate beneath my palm now read, Coldwater Relay. For 1 second, both names felt correct. Noah, Ruth said, read what is posted. Before I could answer, the auxiliary speaker came alive. My voice returned from earlier that afternoon. Balsam Ridge, go ahead. The recording was clear, down to rain tapping from my jacket. Then it repeated the final 5 seconds. Rule 4. I killed the console power and pulled its backup battery. The room went silent, but the carrier light remained on. Across the dead speaker, my voice said, confirming Morrow Gap. I had never spoken those words. On the map, every grounded marker began changing names at once. The first marker changed from Sugarlands to Coldwater before anyone could repeat my unit. Ruth cut across the confusion. Stop transmitting. Field team only. 4 of us left the annex with rope, paper maps, a rescue litter, orange survey cloth, and radios stripped of their batteries. We followed the new road only as far as the first black street sign. Beyond it, speech became too dangerous. So we used hand signals and measured every interval with rope. The sign read 19. 50 yards later, another sign read 19. Then another. Each stood at a different junction. We covered every one without passing until the person behind confirmed the route we had used. Even so, our written distances stopped agreeing. My map showed a quarter mile. Ruth's showed 6/10. The ranger carrying the litter had written nothing at all, only a street name none of us remembered seeing. The valley opened below us. Houses stood along a paved road beneath ridges that should have held uninterrupted forest. Coldwater residents gathered on porches, watching us with the exhausted patience of people waiting for officials to admit a road closure was real. The missing hikers sheltered inside a brick municipal building beside rising brown water. They were not speaking in unison anymore. They were coughing, arguing, comforting children, and shouting names we had already verified. A woman pressed permit 7419 against the glass. Behind us, a powerless radio clicked inside Ruth's pack. My recorded voice said, confirming Morrow Gap. Every street sign turned toward us. The grounding chain was failing. Through Ruth's batteryless handset, park units reported markers changing names, then voices dropping out one by one. We could carry the hikers uphill. We could not tell them where uphill led. Ruth pointed toward a municipal building across the flooded square. A radio mast rose from its roof, older than the houses around it. Over the entrance, weathered letters read, Morrow Gap Communications. The door stood open. Inside, someone keyed a microphone. All 31 voices came through the dead radios at once. Authorized Ranger on site, they said. Then the building's basement light switched on. Ruth looked at me, then at the doorway. Whatever waited below had been expecting a ranger, not rescuers. The basement stairs descended beneath the communications building in a straight concrete run. Ruth went first. I followed with one hand on the rail, counting each step because the numbers painted on the walls changed whenever I looked away. At the bottom, we found no control room. We found layers of them. Switchboards from different decades stood against the same stone wall. Copper wire disappeared into cracks too narrow for conduit. Modern repeaters hummed beside vacuum tube sets and hand-cranked field radios. Every unit carried a park, county, or federal inventory tag. None shared the same agency name. At the center sat a desk facing a microphone. A ledger lay open beneath it. The entries were not locations. They were acknowledgments. Unit heard. Position repeated. Authority accepted. Beneath those words, routes, roads, settlements, and names had been entered in different inks. Some were underlined. Others had been crossed through until the paper tore. Ruth touched the stone wall. This is older than Coldwater. The microphone keyed itself. My voice came through the room. Balsam Ridge, go ahead. I understood then why the rules required 2 rangers. A radio call was only a claim. A grounded ranger gave that claim a witness. A second ranger repeating the location made it shared. After that, maps, records, and memory began arranging themselves around the agreement. The machinery did not create Morrow Gap. It approved which version could remain. Something moved behind the stone, slow enough to feel through the rail rather than hear. The switchboards answered with soft clicks, one after another, as though the mountain were counting us. My first reply had not rescued anyone. It had given Morrow Gap an authorized witness. Ruth looked toward the flooded square above us. Then do not give it another location. The hikers still needed extraction. The Coldwater residence still existed. Campsite 27 was still disappearing. We could not confirm where any of them belonged. But names were not coordinates. People were not roads. I pulled the ledger toward me and found the permit list. We confirm the person, I said, never the place. Upstairs, 31 separate voices began calling their own names. The first name came from the flooded square. Elaine Mercer, Ruth answered from the basement rail. Elaine Mercer confirmed. She did not repeat a road, valley, building, or coordinate. Above us, one ranger touched the municipal doorframe and confirmed Ruth. Another grounded against the radio mast and confirmed him. The chain moved outward person by person. Each name carried only after the previous ranger's location had been fixed by someone else. The water stopped climbing. We brought the injured out first, then the children, then everyone who could walk. Each person crossed the square after stating their name. Nobody said where they lived. Nobody answered when the dead radios asked them to confirm Morrow Gap. Coldwater residents joined the line. Some carried keys. One woman held a photograph of a house already fading behind her. We confirmed her name and nothing else. The street signs lost their numbers. The paved road narrowed into mud. By the time the final hiker reached the ridge, the municipal building had become a stand of young hemlocks. The basement rail remained under my hand for 3 seconds longer than the stairs beneath it. Then I was gripping a wet root. Morrow Gap did not vanish cleanly. 7 Coldwater residents came out with us. Their fingerprints existed, but no birth certificates did. They remembered spouses nobody else remembered, schools that had never opened, and funerals in a cemetery absent from every survey. Ruth remembered Balsam Ridge again. She did not remember E. Vance. The open locker was gone when we returned. Campsite 27 reappeared before dawn. All 6 visitors were accounted for. None remembered the map turning white. The 31 hikers survived. That is the sentence the official report uses. It does not mention the blank corridor now printed through every park map between Laurel Fork and the old annex. Trails stop at its edge. GPS units refuse to calculate through it. Rangers are instructed to route around it without naming it. 3 months later, I left the Smokies. Last week, at 2:13 in the afternoon, the unplugged radio on my kitchen shelf clicked on. 31 separate voices spoke my street number. Then a child asked me to place my hand against the wall. "Ranger Barrett," she said, "confirm your home address for us now."